Hey everyone, welcome back. This is our last lecture of the semester. I just wanted to cover art since 1970 and see what are some of the latest developments and how this connects with where we began the semester with the Renaissance, right? So we've just kind of seen the full spectrum of art evolution to think about. How artists are responding to our contemporary world. And maybe as you have continued to think about your own artistic voice, you can maybe become a little more familiar with the artists that are out there and the things that they're responding to that might be a little bit more familiar to you and give you some ideas and thoughts as you continue to progress as artists. Let's first take a look at minimalism. This is really the last major movement of the 20th century that unites artists together in a kind of a quasi group coming together, having similar ideas and objectives. We saw this really happening first with Impressionism, where there was this group of artists that came together to rebel against the salons and to rebel against the idea of, formal training, finished, polished works of art that have to focus on ocular reality. They wanted to focus more on the immediacy of the world. And then art movements after this, you see a similar objective where artists will come together and form a new movement centered around common principles. And so you see Cubism, Futurism, Dadaism, Surrealism, they're all kind of coming together and forming their own movement around certain principles. But it's a group of them, it's a collective. And minimalism is really the last major movement that we see artists kind of quasi coming together and having similar objectives. They're not as, they're not as united as other art movements that come before them. You just have a group of, different artists doing similar kind of ideas or similar kind of objectives. And so that's roughly what minimalism is, right? So it's an art movement that arose in the 1960s that somewhat feeds into this idea of our postmodern world has become complex and chaotic. This idea that life is too uncertain, and so let's focus on simplicity. We've seen that trend in art repeatedly, right? We see it with post-impressionists like Paul Gauguin just saying the world is corrupt at the end of the 19th century. So let's focus on simplicity. We see this idea again with the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, where they're like, life is too complex, let's go back to simplicity. Or we see it with Fauvism, right? So it's a reoccurring theme, right? How do we deal with complexity? How do we deal with the modern world, right? It's a reaction against abstract expressionism because it seeks to distance the artist's mind, consciousness, influence, and or agenda from his or her art. And so the idea is not to be about trying to understand the inner workings of Jackson Pollock or Barnett Newman. It's about trying to distance oneself from the art in a very similar way to what we see with Andy Warhol and trying to recreate like the factory quality of a work of art to reflect mass consumption, mass consumerism, to reflect a factory, to make it feel as though it's reflecting the values that we have, right? We are really into mass consumption today, so art should reflect what we value. I think I skipped a sentence though. Minimalism strips art down to its fundamental elements, right? Hence the name, right? So it's about minimal artistic input in order to remove emotion, remove ideas, insights of the artist. To this end, it eliminates shapes, colors, forms, lighting, objects, etc., which traditionally artists utilize to convey their message. And so it's all about, well, what lighting did Caravaggio use? Or what colors did Michelangelo implement, right? Or what forms do we see with Raphael? And then we're trying to understand what the artist is doing, to understand their genius, to understand their insights, to understand their philosophy, their view of the world. What Minimalist is seeking to do is trying to distance that, try to move that down. And it's a similar idea that we see with Dadaism, as it casts that long shadow over the 20th century, questioning what is art. Minimalists kind of take that idea and suggest maybe it's not about artistic insights, right? Dadaism had this idea of you can just take any news article, cut up all the words, throw it in a bag, and then pull them out randomly. and then you can write them down and have a poem, right? And that poem is going to reflect the randomness and chaos of the world around us. But it suggests, it undercuts this idea, this message that artists have some type of insight, poets have some type of genius to be able to convey about some message about the larger issues of the world and the meaning of life. They're suggesting maybe art is just a product, and we need to maybe stop putting so much gravitas, weightiness to it, right? Rather than going to a cathedral and praying in front of an altar piece, maybe it's just paint on a canvas. And that in of itself, that doesn't make it value less. It in and itself is valuable because of the paint on the canvas. And so it's changing how we interact with the work, right? This distance between the artist and the artist's message is achieved through emphasizing banal, ordinary, repetitive, or trite elements. Some artists place the audience and or viewer as the central interest of the work, becoming part of the work itself, and in so doing, it encourages the viewer to come to a new understanding of art, himself or herself, and his or her environment. And so in this way, similar to what we talked about with some of the art definitions of the 20th century, that it's no longer about just art being a product away from society. It's about art being the process of creation, and the process of creation continues on when you include the viewer, that their experience of it becomes part of the work itself. Let's take a look at a couple of minimalists. Frank Stella was influenced by Jasper John's literalness of art, so he's the one that does the flags, he's the one that does the targets, which he saw in 1958 at the Leo Castelli Gallery. However, John's works have an external reference, such as a flag or a target. Like Reinhardt, who is kind of the major philosopher of minimalism that kind of puts together the ideas of minimalism, Stella abstracts John's ideas and takes them to the extreme by focusing on simple geometric forms. Stella asserts that what you see is what you see, right? There is no hidden agenda of the artist. So there is no, but what was Caravaggio really meaning? What was Michelangelo trying to do? What's Frank Stella's overall message? Was it a political message? Is it a social message? Is it a religious message? There is no idea. The title suggests in Lake City, there is no lake or city. It is merely lines. There's no idea. The title suggests a vacation cottage or a busy city, but the lack of complexity of forms undermines the title. Hatra 1 asserts that painting is an object. The form and colors have no relationship and therefore promote no idea. So this is Lake City, and it's just geometric forms, right? And so again, this leads to the question, right? What in the world is it about? Is it about a lake? Is it about a city? Is it about some type of vacation? Is it about how humanity is overworked? Is it that we're too lazy? What is it suggesting? And he says it's just paint on a canvas. It has geometric forms. But I don't know. It's can art be just art and that's it? Right? And I think that's something that for you as artists to think about. He says, I don't like to say I've given my life to my art. I prefer to say say art has given me my life. Right? So a different kind of thought process. And here's another quote that he says. He says, my painting is based on the fact that only what can be seen is there. It really is an object. Any painting is an object, and anyone who gets involved enough in this finally has to face up to the objectness of whatever it is he's doing. He is making a thing. All I want anyone to get out of my paintings, and all I ever get out of them, is the fact that you can see the whole idea without any confusion. You see, what you see is what you see, right? However, right, so the idea is that it's just what it is, and that's the work of art, and it doesn't have any necessarily deeper meaning to it. However, it produces a lot of confusion, ironically, because we're confused because we're looking for the meaning. And the more that we look for the deeper meaning, the more that we become confused. And I think what he would say is you're missing the point, right? However, right, if his work is just about having paint on a canvas, why title it Lake City? It's a kind of a confusion. I mean, it's getting us to think about, right, a framework in mind. It's putting a kind of a seed of thought into our minds. If he just wanted to put paint on a canvas, it seems like it would be better titled Untitled or something of that nature. I don't know, maybe, right? But again, a question for this is, with this quote of mine, and why are so many confused with Stella's art? Does this mean that his art has failed? What you see is what you see. And if we're confused by it, maybe, right? Maybe what he's trying to do, trying to eliminate confusion, is actually providing to the confusion. But part of our confusion, I think, lies in our desire to know more or to see more, or that there's more there than the actual paint. This is Hatra. Again, it's just geometric shapes and colors, very similar to what we see with the Bauhaus, right? The Bauhaus is trying to use geometric shapes and colors in order to try to inspire, lead society to a new ideal. I don't know if that's necessarily what minimalism is seeking to do. I don't know if they have those lofty ambitions to try to lead and direct society, as just to try to simplify life and just to suggest that we are living in a very chaotic world. Maybe we've made life too complex, and maybe we need to strip back a little bit, step back from all of the complexity and find the simplicity. He says the idea in being a painter is to declare an identity, not just an identity, just not my identity, an identity for me, but an identity big enough for everyone to share in. Isn't that what art is all about, right? This idea that if we narrow it down to a political message, or we narrow it down to a religious message, then it becomes more specific for a very, smaller group. But if you want to touch everyone, right, we have to kind of expand the idea, expand the accessibility of it. He says, I'm always getting into arguments with people who want to retain the old values in painting, the humanist values that always find on the canvas, right? So that's the idea of the Renaissance and beyond, this idea of there's something more than just paint on a canvas. If you pin them down, they always end up asserting that there's something there besides the paint on the canvas. My painting is based on the fact that only what can be seen there is there. It really is an object. Any painting is an object. And so the question that I think we can ask about this that relates to our discussion of Dadaism is, does the fact that paint is just paint on a canvas invalidate it? Does it make it less art? Or should it make it less art? Right? It's again of what is art? What is our expectation? Do we expect art to be something more deeper, philosophical, something more profound? Or can art simply be just paint on a canvas? Is that enough? Right? Maybe, right? Something to think about. This is just another one, the Marriage of Reason and Squalor 2, right? So it's not even one. It's a second rendition of this. Stella says that art is simply about what is there. If this is true, why give it the title, The Marriage of Reason and Squalor? Does this contradict his objectives? Or does this bring attention to the fact that we continually want there to be more there? And then the fact that there's nothing there, then we start to say, okay, maybe we're expecting too much of all art. Michelangelo and the whole lot, right? Let's take a look at a couple other minimalists and what they're doing. And there's similarities and differences. Donald Judd focused on sculpture and wanted to capture real objects in real space. There is no social message. He is not critiquing the war with Vietnam. He is not advocating for world peace. He's not commenting on capitalism. To him, art should not do any of these. He uses the literal application of art to be three-dimensional, to create the illusion of depth and realism. To be literal, he abandons painting and focuses on three-dimensional space. It is not abstract expressionism that conveys a thought or idea. The idea for Judd and minimalism in general is to focus on the basics. Basic concepts are uncorrupted by ideology, political, social ideology. Geometry is pure, so Judd focused on geometric forms. He is also he does not title his works because titles promote ideas. They have an underlining meaning. So he's kind of taking that idea of Frank Stella to the next level, right? So let's take a look at a couple of his sculptures. He says, sculpture has, everything sculpture has, my work doesn't. So again, the idea of expectations, the idea of trying to create a humanistic experience, right? His works of art are just these panel boxes, and he lines them up, and he has different colors of film in between them. And then as the light interacts with them, it seems as though they glow, and it seems like they have a lighting source in and of themselves. The new work obviously resembles a sculpture more than it does a painting, but he suggests it is nearer to painting, the idea of using light and using the idea of colors within light. Here's a couple other ones. This gives you the sense of just the boxes. These are just kind of boxes that he creates, and then he puts the film in between them, and as a light comes in, it reflects, and it looks like they're kind of glowing, that they have a light source. And here's just a golden one. But again, they're untitled. The question is, what is this all about? And it's about us experiencing just something, right? It's not necessarily about a political message or a social message. It's just about capturing the world around us. Dan Flavin experimented or examines the geometric forms and literal applications of light. His focus is on questioning of art as the dependent on an original object. These are very similar to Duchamp's ready-mades. The question is, what makes something a work of art? Is it that the artist creates something? Is it the original insights of the artist? Is the idea that the artist promotes? Flavin states that art can be anything. It does not have to have an idea or an agenda. He also focused on one aspect of art. If art is about form, structure, textiles, lines, light, and shading, then can one aspect of these be considered art? If we remove everything else and just focus on one, is that enough to make it art? He states that if art is light, here is light, thus it is art, right? And so here's what he does with his sculptures. He does sculptures of neon lights or fluorescent lights, and that's it, right? Monument 5, he says, it is what it is, and it ain't nothing else. Everything is clearly, openly, plainly delivered. And you're to go through it, you're to interact with it, and you're to experience it, right? He says, one might not think of light as a matter of fact, but I do. And it is, as I said, as plain and open and direct as art as you'll ever find. And so he just examines the idea of light, something that's so ubiquitous to us, right? We just go in the room, we flip on the light, we don't really think about it, but he puts it in a new context. He gives it a certain shape, and it gives it this sense, right? It gives it a kind of a new feeling, right? And then this one he does. This one's kind of interesting because this is Pink Out of a Corner and is dedicated to Jasper Johns. And again, why do you think that he dedicates this to Jasper Johns? Is it the fact that he's focusing on that idea of literalness of art rather than having some type of specific meaning or insights or ideas, right? But I think it's very similar to what we see with Barnett Newman in his Virtuosa Sublimis with the zip. The idea that humanity is reaching out, looking, right? Connecting. I think he's getting us to connect with the ordinary events that we might not necessarily experience. We might kind of forget on a day-to-day basis. But it's different though too, right? Abstract expressionism is more about the universal elements of us finding some type of truth in the chaos and confusion of the world around us, trying to find some type of collective unconsciousness, right? With One Mint, we see with Barnett Newman, he's trying to focus on the religious ideas of the atonement, our desire to reconnect with the divine. With Flavin, we see a similar idea, right? How do we find meaning in chaos or meaning amid the chaos and confusion of the world? How do we find certainty? We need to strip down the complexity and focus us on maybe one element at a time, right? This is just me in one of his exhibits in LA at the LA County Modern Art Museum. And it's interesting, as you walk through it, you have a different application of light. It looks differently, it feels differently, and you start to interact with this lighting source in a slightly different way, right? Let's take a look at a couple more. Walter de Maria, he focused on the literal aspect of nature. As minimalists sought to remove ideology from art, by eliminating form, texture, shapes, light, space, movement, and time. De Maria focused on the natural world. To remove the artist from art, really all you have left is nature. Earth Room is in a 3,600 square foot loft where he added dirt it's in New York City. It is designed to be experienced. One must go to and to feel and experience it with his or her senses. The work gives us a greater sense of time and space. The viewer can feel and smell the art and notice how his or her hearing changes with as the room starts to become more dense with the dirt. The viewer is an important aspect of the work. He brings the romantic landscape to the urban world. However, there is no expression of the artist's emotions, right? So Earth Room, here's Earth Room. You can just see the dirt that's filling this loft in New York City, and the viewer goes upstairs and they can smell the dirt and they can feel the dirt. And again, part of this is our lack of connection with the natural world, that we're losing this urban world that we're living in. We're losing that essence of that connection. But the other part of this work is about us, the viewer, going in and interacting with it. Half of the work is about him creating this experience. The other half is about us going and experiencing it. He's mainly known for his lightning fields, though, that he does in New Mexico. He puts these metal rods in the field in New Mexico, and then with a lightning storm, he goes out and photographs it light. But again, it's taking a look at one aspect of art, such as lighting, and connecting us to nature to find greater meaning, I guess, harmony, insights, hope, in finding more of the simplicities amid the complexity. Let's take a look at Christo and Jean-Claude. These are a husband and wife duo that really have dominated contemporary art up until she dies in 2009, but he's carried on the legacy. What their works are concerned with is connecting people to art by providing new insights to ordinary objects. And this was the work of art that Christo allegedly turned in for his senior art project. And so he just takes a bottle, he wraps it with some type of paper and twine, and then he submits it to his art professor, who knew Christo to be a very good student. However, he submitted this, and he started wondering why in the world a very good student would turn this in as a final senior project. And he was super confused, as we all probably would be. He's wondering if Christo maybe got pinched for time and this was just kind of an act of desperation. But the more he started thinking about it, the more he realized the artistic insights that Christo was calling attention to. The more he thought about it, the more he starts to become more inclined to question what a bottle is, our expectations of what art is. Again, it's that continuation of that argument that Dadaism presents. What is art? Can something ordinary be art? If art is a capturing what we value as human beings, and the ordinary world is generally where we're all living, or most of us are living, capturing that should be art, right? And then taking something ordinary and maybe giving something a new kind of context or meaning changes our interaction with that ordinary object, right? So again, it's similar to what we see with the fountain in terms of he didn't make this, he didn't construct the bottle, he did wrap it, he did have his own kind of flair of wrapping, I suppose. But the question is, can something ordinary be art? What makes it art? The fact that he wrapped it puts it in a new context. And the question is that enough to make it art? This is the one that he's mainly known for. This is called Running Fence. This went across the state of California all the way down into the San Francisco Bay. It went like 26 miles, 24.5 miles long, and it's 18 feet high. And he has to go to each individual rancher, because this is Northern California. It's an agrarian part of the community. It's mainly ranching country up where he put this fence, and he has to go to every single rancher and get their permission to put a fence up, right? But it's not just a fence, which a lot of ranchers would be happy with if you put a fence up to help keep the cattle herded together. This is a artsy cloth fence, and so you can only imagine how they weren't really all that fond of him doing this. So he has to get their permission. Then he has to go get the county's permission, because this is crossing county lines. It's crossing through cities. He has to get the city permits, and it takes him years to be able to put this together. It costs him $3 million, $12 million in 2015 dollars. Who knows what that would be with inflation today? But it was expensive. And what he does is, not only does he get people, permission, he gets them out there digging holes. And this is kind of an interesting idea, right? And we have to think about why this is. Well, why would he put a cloth fence up? And it's not like it's still there. It was only up for a couple of weeks, and he takes it down and it's gone forever. And so then the question is why, right? But the interesting thing about this is, I mean, if you were to see a cloth fence just kind of up randomly, you're driving back and forth between Rexburg and Salt Lake, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then right after you get out of Pocatello, there's just kind of this nothingness all the way until you get to about, northern Utah around Ogden area. There's just nothingness. Now imagine if one day you're driving by and the landscape just kind of blurs together at that point because we're just so overwhelmed by the lack of landscape. I mean, there's a lot of pretty areas around there, don't get me wrong, but just there's just a lot of sameness that's there. Now, if we all of a sudden saw an 18-foot cloth fence that just went off into the horizon, what would we do, right? Most of us would stop the car, pull over, and start to question what in the world's going on. And then we would notice that there are probably 5-10 other cars stopped having the same question. And then what all of a sudden is going to happen is that we're going to start talking to each other. Why is this here? Oh, this is an art fence. Why is this an art fence? What makes this art? All of a sudden, they're in the middle of an art conversation. People that would never go to a museum before are now all of a sudden having a conversation about art. People that would never create art are out there digging holes to put an art fence up. It's a different kind of context. Rather than putting art in a museum where fewer people will go and fewer people have access to, he brings art to the people to make it relevant to what we're doing, giving us new meaning, new insights to the ordinary things that we encounter. Trying to think about how do we bridge the gap where the art world has kind of walled itself off into this kind of elitism. How do we bridge the gap to try to connect art to people again? How do we make art more relevant to the, quote, common man, right? So how do we bring art to the people? He's thinking about these ideas, and he goes throughout the world. This one he does Pont Neuf, which is Bridge 9 in Paris. He goes and wraps this, right? People walk across this every day. Millions of tourists come to Paris, and they walk across this bridge, and they don't really think about it. But all of a sudden, you wrap it in cloth, people will all of a sudden start talking about, what is it? They start to see the bridge differently. They start to interact with it differently. This one he does in southern Florida around Miami. He goes and wraps some islands, right? And he goes, and every place that he goes, he gets local workers. He employs local workers to go out and work with him, and they become part of the art experience. They become artists themselves. So again, it questions this idea of what is an artist? What is art? And how can we connect people to art? How can we find new meaning to ordinary events, right? So this idea of minimalism, how do we take a look at ordinary things, strip art down to its basic elements, wrap something, provide new meaning to it? How do we simplify the world? That the world of complexity, we might miss a lot of things around us. But you wrap an island, and all of a sudden something that wouldn't have had a lot of meaning, or we might have missed, all of a sudden has new meaning to us. And so trying to simplify life, trying to question the idea of what art is, and trying to connect it with the people. This one he does thousands and thousands of umbrellas across Northern California, and then he does another sister project in Japan, which he uses blue umbrellas. But it's this idea of coming together of East and West. So he doesn't always wrap things, but he's always thinking about how do I provide new meaning to things that become ubiquitous to us. This one he wraps Central Park in New York City. So you can see the idea of this one he calls gates, and so the wind just kind of blows through the gates as people interact, as people go through. This one's about 23 miles of gates. It cost him $21 million. It was up for 16 days, and it was gone forever. This one took him 20 years to get approved in New York City. People in New York City, when he proposed this initially, I think he proposed it in the 80s. They said, yeah, no thanks. Thanks, but no thanks. And so you think about New York City being kind of this cultural center of art, but still people struggle with wondering what makes his works art. But then they interact with it, then they engage with it, and they start to see, oh, art can be more than just something in a museum. This is his most recent project that he did in 2016. He wrapped some islands in Italy, Lake Iseo. And this one he calls floating piers, where he puts these plastic cubes and he wraps the plastic cubes with a cloth so that people can walk on the water. This was up for 2 weeks and it's gone forever. So this is Christo standing with his boots on the pier. And then this is just the people that just come from all over the world to see, to experience his work of art, and to be able to have something new, have a new experience. But for him and for a lot of minimalists, it's not just about him as the artist, it's about us as the engaging with the art. The art is not just about the actual creation or the creator and his insights. It's about people going and interacting with it. This is the art as well, right? Just as much as the cloth is the art, the people interacting with it is the art as well, right? This is one that he's currently trying to work on. He's trying to get it passed, but it's been very challenging for him that he wants to wrap the Arkansas River in Colorado. And so he's going to have these pegs. This is the design. And a lot of people ask, how is it that he funds all of his art? So sometimes what he does is he sells his design. Sometimes he sells like the cloth for the running fence. He has the cloth, and then you can buy a piece of the art. And this is all done just to fund his next project, right? So he lives in virtual poverty and kind of humble means, because for him it's just about creating the art. And then you could see, the different pegs on the different sides, and then the cloth kind of weaves in between this to give this sense of it being wrapped. And then the idea is that people can still go underneath it. He's very concerned about the ecological effect, and so this is only up for a very short period of time, and then he takes it down, and then that's it, right? Then it's gone forever. And but he's inviting people to come in and interact with it, right? Thinking about this and how kind of tying these ideas to ideas that we've been taking a look at, seeing the forest through the trees, compare and contrast. How do these works, both of these works by Hans Holbein and also Christo and Jean Claude, how do these works invite viewers to look deeper? How do they seek to provide new meaning to ordinary life? And which do you like better? Which one is more relevant to us today? Which one gets us to kind of think about the world deeper, right? Engage with art. Think about art differently, right? Just some thoughts to think about as we think about the Renaissance, as we think about bringing this semester to a close. Just a couple more. Just one more, I think, minimalist. I want to take a look at Robert Smithson. And the reason why I want to take a look at him is because this is a major work of art that's in every art book, and it's right outside of Salt Lake. And so if you are ever going down to Salt Lake, or if you live near Salt Lake, I highly recommend. This is still there to this day. Similar to the ideas of minimalism, he's getting us to look at simple ideas such as the shape. Here's the spiral shape. And then inviting people to go and interact with it, that we become part of the artwork, we become part of the experience, right? Smithson's art focused on earthworks. His works generally have very large proportions that are designed to allow viewers to interact with them so that we become part of them. He wants us to reconnect with our natural surroundings. Maybe this, finding the simplicity of nature, finding the simplicity of amid the complexity will help us to find greater happiness, joy, simplicity. I don't know. Solace in the world, less anxiety. And then this is where it's currently at. So you can see Salt Lake City towards the bottom, and then this is just north of Salt Lake, kind of just directly west of Brigham City. And so it's kind of off the beaten path just a little bit. But what's interesting about this is he never thought that this would last to this day, right? He thought this was only going to be up for a couple of years, and then the Salt Lake would just kind of wash it away, and then it would be gone. And very similar to what we see with Christo, right? Just kind of temporary art. Ironically, though, it's still there, right? And so this is me going to it with my family a couple of years ago. The difficulty is that the Salt Lake, due to climate change, is like all the way back here on the horizon. It's like 2 miles away. That there's the shore's not even close anymore, which is kind of interesting. So this is just me showing pictures of me walking through to what it looks like today. The stones kind of turn black from the original white. That's my daughter standing in the middle of it. But again, just kind of interacting with it. Again, thinking about the forest through the trees. How do both works seek to create awareness about our relationship to nature? And which work do you like better? Similar ideas. And so the idea for these questions is to think about how contemporary art, although it looks different, although art has taken maybe a different direction, it has similar objectives to what art has always done. Always seeking truth, always seeking to understand who we are, always seeking to try to find some type of meaning in a complex world, always seeking to elevate our eyes, our visions just a little bit, seeking to find some type of direction, perhaps, but similar objectives, right? The aesthetics has changed because the world around us has changed, but the ideas and the ambition is the same. Let's take a look at just a couple more. These are more contemporary artists. I don't know how I would, frame them. I would say that they're more postmodern artists. Marina Abramović. She was born in Serbia and moved to New York. Abramović is concerned with the objectivity and degradation of the female body. Her feminist art calls attention to the violence that can be associated with reducing a human being to an object. Her works often blur the relationship between the artist and the viewer, where the viewer becomes a participant in the work of art. And I wanted to take a look at this one. This one she did in 2009 for the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And what she does is she sits in a chair, and then she has an empty chair, and you are to sit across from her. So she invites the viewer to sit across from her for any length of time. And that's it. She's not painting anything. She has someone, Marco Anelli, is photographing it, but that's not really what the art is. The art is going and sitting with an artist, interacting with an artist, right? So as we go to see, a Donatello or Da Vinci or a Rembrandt, we're invited to kind of engage with the artist through the medium of their art. And so the artist created this, and then we can think about the artist and the conscious choices that they made. She's kind of removing that barrier. Now it's just us interacting with the artist. And it provides kind of a different kind of context. And so this was only up for about 2, maybe 3 weeks in the Museum of Modern Art, and then it's gone forever, right? She's not going to sit there all day, every day. But the idea that people can go in for a short period of time and just interact with her, again, for any duration. And this guy sat across from her for 1 hour and 45 minutes. She sat for 6 hours and 26 minutes. Some people sat for the entire length of the day. They just went there, first one in line. They sit there and they annoy everybody else behind them, right? Because by this time, there's like a huge line. People want to participate in this work because modern art is about us as much as it is about them. But it's also about the experience, right? Some people suggest that this is not art because she's not painting or creating anything, right? But again, it furthers that discussion of Duchamp. What is art? Does the artist have to create or touch anything? But what we see here is that what we're losing in our world today is connectivity. How many times do we really just sit and interact with someone? How much do we actually just look at someone and just be there, be present with someone? Maybe what we're losing in our digital age is that idea of connectivity. We feel connected through social media, the internet, through cell phones, whatever the case may be, but we've never been so disconnected. We've never been so alone, right? That loneliness is becoming one of the greatest diseases, killers to health. Right? Because people feel so alone. And so this idea of longing to connect, longing to feel something, right, is there. And so the question that she's bringing is, are we losing connectivity? And my question is, would this be more art if she perhaps held a frame? But I mean, isn't that what a portrait is? If she held a frame, that would be a portrait, right? But here she removes the frame. She's tearing down, and similar to minimalists, she's tearing down the barriers of art to just show what art is. And that's it, right? That art is just about connecting with the artist. The artist is providing a framework to understand and experience things, but then it's also about the viewer and what they encounter, how they encounter. I want to show you a film. As they were doing this, they brought her former boyfriend that she had. They haven't seen each other since, I think, the 60s at this point. Both of them were artists. They both collaborated way back when, and then they hadn't seen each other since. And so they, as two artists, they decided to break up in an epic way. They can't, as artists, you can't just break up in a normal way. You have to break up in an epic way. And so they went to the Great Wall of China. And as they were breaking up, one went one way and the other went the other way. And then they never seen each other. And then she did this for the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And then someone said, wouldn't it be interesting if we brought her former boyfriend that she collaborated with to the exhibit? And then they filmed it. I just want to show you that scene. So you can just see the experience, right? What it's like, the line behind them. Not really sure. Again, a lot of people aren't really sure how they're supposed to respond. Am I supposed to laugh? Supposed to smile? And the answer is yes. Be you, right? Some people are confused by it. But again, it's causing this discussion about what we experience in art. Sometimes there was a table. I think they initially started with a table, and then they removed the table between the artist and the viewer. And here's her former boyfriend. So again, it creates this question about what is art. Is art emotional? Is art about transferring ideas and thoughts? Is art about getting us to think about the world around us? Is art about displaying some type of artistic insights, emotions? Getting us to think more about who we are and the meaning of life, right? The irony here is we have all of these means of technology to connect with one another, but we've never felt so disconnected and alone, right? Kind of an interesting insights that she calls attention to about the world around us. And I think she does this in 2007, and I think that COVID really helped to underscore some of the problems, that she highlights here. This idea that we're losing connection, right? And then we have COVID where we go on lockdown and we have this lack of connection even more. Let's take a look at a couple more artists just to end the semester. Ulla von Brandenburg. She was born in Germany and lives in Paris. She works in blending theater, painting, and photography. Her works question reality. Kugel was filmed through a spherical mirror that you see at the bottom to create a disorienting effect where the characters seem like they are trapped in the ball. She invites viewers to consider the reality and question what is real. Visitors confront their expectations as they understand their space differently and must come to terms with what they think is real or constructed. And so it's getting us to question the idea of, do we really see reality, or is reality presented to us through the internet, through the media, through news, through the people around us, through our encounters, family and friends? Does that maybe shape the way that we see reality, and maybe the way we see reality isn't actually truth? That is perhaps our truth. I think that's the common phrase that we use today. But does our truth reflect a larger truth? And so I think she's suggesting in a world of deep fake in a world where we can just pretty much distort anything, that we really need to be more critical and skeptical of the images that surround us, getting us to question our reality and what we think is real, right? Taking a look at Corey Archangel, he's located in Buffalo, and his works examine the importance of video games on contemporary culture and how people are increasingly living their lives virtually. So again, these kind of postmodern artists are concerned about reality and what it means to live in the digital age. He alters video games from the 1970s and 80s to create new experiences. Interested in the mass consumption of technology and how quickly it becomes outdated and obsolete, he finds it interesting that objects can still function but be no longer valued because they've been replaced by something new. In Super Mario Clouds that you see, just the video, so he does video installments of video games, strips the game of everything except moving clouds. This changes the objectives, which is now unclear. It is no longer about saving a princess. Viewers instead simply watch clouds move across the screen. Various self-playing bowling games chronicles the evolution of bowling games. However, he changes the coding so that every bowl is a gutter ball. These alterations invite viewers to have new experiences with the virtual world by making them aware that these altered games are constructed and it's not about skill or choice. They instead are about a reality Archangel imposes upon them. Right? There's this false reality that he imposes. So again, getting into think about the false reality that might be imposed upon us in other facets. This produces frustration and tension to bring to light central questions of this age regarding reality and truth. And then the last one for the semester is Elmgreen and Draxet. They met in Copenhagen and have collaborated to create sculptures that question the viewer's interaction with the exterior world by creating a dystopian aesthetic. Prada Marfa seen below is a sculpture that is in the shape of a Prada store located in Marfa, Texas, which is in the middle of nowhere. The storefront in the middle of the barren surroundings is out of context. The emptiness of the landscape juxtaposes with the liveliness of the storefront. It is as though the store has been relocated from a posh town, maybe Beverly Hills or something. In Marfa, however, it serves no functional purpose. It's not a real store. It's merely a sculpture designed to replicate the growing consumerism of a post-industrial world that has no practical value. In Collectors, which is another piece, he likewise creates an aspect of the post-industrial world with an empty estate that appears abandoned after some catastrophic event. It captures the sense of emptiness and abandonment. So again, they're questioning our idea of reality. They're questioning this idea of loneliness and how can we find connectivity in a world of information, in a world of disinformation. How can we find truth? Just a couple of examples of what contemporary artists are doing, some of their contemporary responses to the world around us. All right, it's been a great semester. I wish you guys the best of luck, and I've really enjoyed working with you.